and welcome to the Reiki Women podcast. My name is Carrie Varela from the Reiki Healing Society, and today we have my gorgeous colleague, Bronwen Logan from Reiki with Bronwen, and our dear friend, Michaela Daystar, got stuck in traffic. Ooh, that's brutal. Right. So she might be joining us, she might not. But today we have a spicy conversation, one that Bronwen, you started as a blog and just shared it out to your community today. And it's a good one. It's really important to talk about. So it's having sexual relationships with your students. And maybe there's a broader conversation about having sexual relationships with your clients. There's clearly an ethical boundary in different industries and psychotherapy and, in teaching communities, whether you be, a teacher at it, really any stage. And it's one that, really can come up in spiritual communities. So we'd love to hear more about your thoughts on impropriety in between students and teachers. What do you think about that, Bronwyn? Why is that important?
Yeah, I mean it's a subject which as I said in the article, I realized that we don't take it very seriously. And even though there's some part of our brain that says this is a serious thing, another part of our brain says that we're used to seeing or hearing this sort of behavior and it's sort of normalized, I think, in a lot of spiritual communities, which my question is, why should that be different to other professions where it's considered inappropriate? And the reason why it's inappropriate is because there is a major power imbalance, whether you're in class, out of class, and the student sees the teacher in a certain light, knows the teacher from a certain light. And there can be a lot of different levels to that between the teacher and student. And there is never any equality in that pairing. So for us to not take it seriously within the system of Reiki, for example, there is a feeling of not taking our practice seriously, not taking the system of Reiki seriously, and not equating it possibly with something like being a professional teacher. And as I was saying in my article, it's not that we like to become a teacher, you'd have to have a degree. I'm not saying we need to have a degree. What I'm saying is that we need to have training in what is ethical behavior as a teacher. So many people go into this as teachers and begin teaching without any understanding of what it means to be a teacher. And that is something that professional teachers obviously are taught. We teach people how to do a reiju, for example, an attunement initiation, but we don't teach what it means to be with people and what it means to respect students and to respect your role as a teacher. Historically, I have done different training, which I feel has supported me as a teacher. And I'm sure there are different things that other teachers could do. I did a course many years ago in teaching English as a foreign language and learned about what it meant to actually be a teacher within that, what it meant to be a teacher and what it meant to be a student, and that the two shouldn't meet. So I've also done teacher training and assessment here in Australia, a certificate in that, which is teaching you what it means, once again, to be a teacher. So different courses like that where you're actually getting information that will help you to understand it better. I don't think there is a place for ignorance as a teacher when it comes to students being vulnerable. And they are vulnerable. You could say, oh, no, they're not. They know exactly what they're getting into. Well, they may, but the thing is that the actual power imbalance will always be there. And so awareness of that doesn't change the fact that it exists. I do think that within spiritual communities, within the system of Reiki, that this subject is I felt like it was almost taboo to talk about because of a couple of things. One is this idea that you're passing judgment on someone. It's not the case. It's not about individuals. It's about how the system works and how we as professionals actually work as teachers, and how we respect the system ourselves. Anyway, those are some of my ideas. There's lots more in it, I think. Carrie, what do you think?
Well, I think it's an important ethical boundary, right? And that's what, um, having greater guidelines and self regulation in Reiki will really help us kind of create better ethical boundaries. And I would highlight the International Association for Reiki Training, ICRT. They do have an organization that you can be a part of, and it has
Well, stop,
lines.
stop, say that again. Go back to I would highlight. Siri came on.
Oh, okay. I would highlight the International Center for Reiki Training, which has a membership organization that you can be a part of. And I was a part of that for many years, and still abide by their code of conduct and ethical guidelines. And I think they're really important to just, be in integrity with, right? And one of those is definitely don't have sexual relationships with your students or your clients. And so that's important too. Um, beyond just the student teacher role, that client relationship role is also super important not to have. Well, I mean, that's an ethical boundary, right? Um, and You're right, there are power imbalances. And maybe we can speak a little bit to that. Like, is that, especially in spiritual communities, somebody is coming to Reiki because of a profound thing that's happening in their life. Maybe they have a challenge in their life. They're dealing with a breakup. They're doing, there might be a really reason why they're drawn to Reiki for healing. And um, in an unhealed state, sometimes we really are striving for validation and to feel seen. There are other, more egoic reasons too to be a part of a spiritual community, and we can all slip into this. Doesn't really matter who you are, how, how far along you are, or how new you are. Is that you're seeking to better yourself, and you might see that a teacher is somebody who is supporting you to be a better person, or um, to feel like you are a good person, and seeking that validation from your teacher. There's a thin line that can happen in a relationship that's not, that ethical boundary has crossed. So, um, like and you see this a lot, in circumstances where teachers have breached this code of conduct, right? Like Bikram Chaudhary is really well known, notorious for raping his students, and so much so that he's been sued like a million times over. This man made millions of dollars within yoga and was sued, and now is like basically excommunicated and living in random countries. Really shouldn't be training anybody in yoga, although he does do trainings. But like all of his money is tied in with these civil lawsuits of students that he's raped. And there's an incredible power about dynamic there. I've heard other really scandalous stories of other spiritual leaders and teachers who have really abused this validation needed by their student or client, and that is really kind of the bridge of fostering those kinds of unhealthy relationships and why they happen. So it's something that, I think I really agree with you. There's no place for ignorance, and students should be aware of it too. You should be aware of why you feel, if you feel any sort of sexual charge or energy towards a teacher, really take a step back from that, because there is something probably in you that needs some validation and maybe you're seeking it externally. Um, and I think there's also a challenge, I would say, with this too, is, and Michaela, she just recently had this video that she posted about her dating life and situation. And the hard thing is too, is, it's different how you meet people. So there's the same ethical guideline in yoga. So, you can't date your students. It's just ethically not aligned. And, if you are a registered yoga instructor, you have this like moral guideline that you have to follow, right? And yet in yoga studios, we're part of a bigger community. There's students coming in and out. Um, and, definitely times where members of the community and yoga teachers like have, created relationships. And so I think it's not something that we need to wag our fingers at, but, you know, recognizing too that there's this community relationship that we have as well, and especially in a yoga community, I don't like feeling like elevated, like, oh, I'm the teacher. I am the teacher, but I'm also part of the community too. um it's also a shared community space where we should come together as equals, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
those
I think
times,
it's something different. It's different.
it is different. What I guess I'm trying to say is not everybody who comes to the yoga community thinks of me as their yoga teacher.
Yeah.
it's it's like those people who have actually come to my classes intensely for a meaning, and like that I have filled a role of teacher for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that, I could just be a casual friend with somebody in the community. Maybe they come to my yoga class, but there's not that teacher student relationship, because we have not engaged in that kind of reciprocal relationship. We've engaged in more of like a friendship,
Yeah.
mutually, you know, different relationship, right? Um, but in the case where there has been a sincere, like, you have given me this knowledge or this practice or this aspect that has helped me explore myself, and we have engaged in client, a, a client healer relationship. I'm not sure I'm
Yeah.
not coming with the right words. Or you come into my Reiki trainings, there's definitely that dynamic at play, so I guess
Yeah.
there's just that distinction. Like, not everybody in my community, just because I'm a Reiki teacher, doesn't mean that I relate to everybody else, in my community in that role, in that relationship too.
Yeah, look, I understand all
What?
that. And I think that, for example, I have a social group that I have evolved, an online social group called Tea Time, which I put in place for students who want to reach out and be with each other. And I'm in that group. I'm not separate to that group. Different people host it each time. And the idea is that we all need community and support from each other. And that is true. That is a different situation to what I'm talking about here, which is where, and I think you also named that. So when a student is learning, their teacher is supposedly the informed one, the one who is the wiser one, who is helping them through whatever it is that they're going through. They are vulnerable to that person in that way. And the teacher has a certain access to understanding that person at a more intimate level. By taking that experience and turning it into something else, so such as a sexual relationship, then that's taking the situation out of a teacher student situation and into something totally different. And that something totally different is then it's an imbalanced situation, because sometimes the student might rightly or wrongly think that the teacher is enlightened, for example, or maybe the teacher is telling the student they're enlightened. There's a lot of different things that can go on here. We've got different extremes. I know you mentioned rape before. That wasn't something that I actually was talking about. I think that's almost something separate. That's an extreme case. But then there's the other end of this where, someone thinks, oh, I'm sexually attracted to this person. Therefore, well, a teacher might think, I'm attracted to this person. Therefore, I have the right to have a relationship with this person. I don't think that ethics allows for that to actually happen. There was a line that I wrote in that article, and it was something like, if you want to start dating someone, you got to look outside your student sphere. There has to be other options in your life.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I wonder if there are some guidelines within psychology or some other, teachers situations where, like, let's say, a relationship really did foster inside of
Mhm.
a professional relationship, and you'd have to terminate that professional relationship and
Right.
like separate from a period of time before you can like, and I'm not even sure if that's possible. So
They
there might
do
be
do
some.
that. They do, and then it has to be for a certain period of time. But as you say, does that make any difference? I don't know. I think there's still this experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting subject, and I mean, again, I think there's this compassion for how we meet people, and we come together, and sometimes we think we're coming together for a certain reason, and sometimes like that genuine attraction and um something like that fosters, but it really needs to happen outside of any sort of professional context, and that's just good business sense, I mean, because you really, as a Reiki practitioner, you're putting yourself at a huge liability if you spark a sexual conversation or relationship with your student, with a client, and a lot of times those kinds of things are not covered by your liability insurance, and so you just have to kind of think about so many different aspects of that, and there's just this general integrity piece, so many spiritual teachers, like I think of Osho, you know he has some really good quotes, and but he was like building a cult and like had like these inappropriate sexual relationships with so many people in his community. Anything, any sort of enlightenment that he reached is completely um you know invalidated,
Yeah.
right, by his inappropriate sexual relationships with his community and his students. And through the lens of non-duality, I get we're all complicated beings and we're not all perfect and not all teachers are perfect, but like, really, would you want your whole career invalidated because of some sexual discretion? I
Yeah.
think that
I find that such an excuse, the one I'm not perfect, right? Because yes, we're not perfect, right? And it's a very easy way out of something like this. Oh, well, we're not perfect. Oh, well, he wasn't perfect. She wasn't perfect. I, like I said, I think that if we take the path to be trained correctly, then there is no place for that, because that is ignorance. It is not the Reiki precepts. It is not being compassionate to other people. It's also not being compassionate to yourself. It's not being honest. It lacks integrity at every level. For me, if I were to say, oh, well, I'm not perfect, it leaves the door open for me to do it again and again,
Mm.
because I'm not perfect. And I don't think that's the answer. As I said, I think training is the answer. We just need to have a better understanding of what it means and what we're actually doing. As a teacher, if I'm sleeping with a student, for the other students that are there, it's difficult because it's showing favoritism, it's creating an inner circle, and that means that there are some students are on the outer circle of this. Also, are we saying within the system of Reiki that that's okay for the level of quality of teaching within the system?
Mm. Yeah, and I apologize for saying, you know,
Oh, no,
about
you
not
don't.
being
I think that's what people do say, Carrie. I think you're right.
right. And I guess my intention on that is that, like, no, yeah, like, nobody's perfect, and there's a problematic aspect about putting a spiritual teacher, especially, on this pedestal of like that they're, you know,
Oh,
somehow better, that they should know better. But like people on a pedestal, they're they're not perfect, they're not going to be like, if you continue to do something, yes, that is like seriously morally wrong, and people who've done that, but like that's why we should not revere our teachers as like this infallible human, creatures. They are fallible, and a lot of times it really does center around this sexual relationship. Like that is the downfall of so many teachers, because perhaps some spiritual teachers are driven by that, driven by being seen, having that kind of uh, connection, this like this imbalance connection between their students and themselves. And I guess so. What I'm trying to say is that it totally negates the whole point um, of their practice and their teachings, and yet like those teachings can still hold the validity, can still be meaningful and inspiring. However, like because of this, that they haven't followed an ethical guideline, that the all of it feels quite meaningless.
Yeah,
And
I think it affects the other students as well, and whatever it is that they are teaching. Also, I think that when I was looking at it I guess I was looking at it in contrast to other professions. So, like professional teachers, if they were to do something like that, there are repercussions because they're doing it within and some sort of organization. Yeah. But we don't have that. And so it does leave, I mean, I could say, oh, everyone should get training, la, la, la. Okay. But if a teacher doesn't want to, then they don't. And they don't have to inform themselves in any way if they don't want to. And nobody's going to say, there is nobody that's going to say that it's wrong. Oh, I mean, people could say that it's wrong, but there is no repercussion for it whatsoever. So there isn't really something that's going to stop this from happening.
yeah, I agree that there's no, you lose your job if you're a teacher, psychotherapist, you lose your license, that really doesn't apply within Reiki. I mean, certainly you could get sued, and
Yeah.
that would be a pretty gnarly repercussion, right? Um, so if nothing else, that would keep somebody in check. But yeah, I think at times, just recognizing how powerful a sexual relationship can be sometimes, and whether it's healthy or not, if people go down that route, it's can be really hard to disconnect from it. So I think um it's just important to be mindful of that. It's important to create healthy boundaries, and recognize that kind of relationship, I agree, I think it's always going to start off on an unhealthy place. And so really, you know always being aware of that. And I think also for so one time I took a Reiki training from, I will not disclose who this teacher was,
Yeah.
who might have been in this class. But let's just say it was a male teacher and it was a female person. And at some point, I heard this female person in the class and this male teacher having a discourse about how she had visions of them being together and traveling together and teaching Reiki together. And this particular teacher was very adamant that that's not going to happen. And it was kind of a weird relationship. It was happening in the training, and but it was, this person had this like fantasy and was like living in it, and all the meditations, here she is, she's like envisioning, being traveling the world with this teacher, and doing that. And I don't know, I don't pretend to know psychology of that, but what I do understand is more than likely that person was actually jealous of the teacher. Like and jealous being like, I want what you have.
Well, maybe.
And that was what was drawing them, what drew her to that. Like, it's like, I want to actually be this teacher that's traveling around and doing these things. And I see the most expedient path is to like attach myself to you.
I don't know.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons.
only, I don't know, but like, you know, we're all perfectly imperfect beings. I think we had a recent episode on that. But
Yeah, we did.
like, stop yourself when you see yourself going down a path that is not a good way to go. That
Yeah,
is not the way. That is not being true to your way of being. That is like letting your most unhealed part of yourself guide the
yeah,
way. And that's I guess what this I think this moral guideline is really trying to get us to avoid doing. And um yeah, so that can cause real harm. Can
yeah.
cause real harm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I did also say if it's hidden, and sometimes it is hidden, if it's hidden, how then does the student feel? What are they tapping into in themselves? They're sort of the hidden part of something or someone else's experience. That shows to me a lot of lack of self-esteem, and really it's perpetuating that rather than. But even say it's not hidden, say it's out there. That's when I was saying then you've got this whole thing of like favoritism, and as a group, it doesn't really work. As in a community, it doesn't really work. I do think that you're right, this thing about being perfectly imperfect. I do think that people who come to the system of Reiki, they come because they're messed up in some way, right? We all have things that happen to us, and then we're like, oh, maybe this will help me. Maybe this will help fix that for me. And this is where we are all vulnerable, all of us. Yeah. And I loved what you just said about for teachers, it's the thing that's not healed that is also creating this. For some teachers, it must be like if they are doing this as a habitual thing, having relationships with students, it's definitely something that's not going well for them. They might be seeing their students as like a lollipop shop, right? We need to somehow find awareness of ourselves as teachers to know if this is what's happening to us, and what is not healed within us, and how do we not bring that into this environment and hurt our students rather than support our students
Mm-hmm. And it's not just hurting our students, it's hurting ourselves, and it's hurting the whole practice of Reiki
as
too.
well.
I mean, it
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
like in Kundalini yoga, there was a yogi, who created Kundalini yoga as we understand it, as a Western phenomenon of what Kundalini yoga. And he was this guru, and after his death, it came out that yeah, he had a ton of inappropriately sexual relationships. And it's been such, I mean, I feel so badly for some of my friends who invested so much in that form of healing, are Kundalini yoga teachers and are part of that lineage that this particular person created. And how tragic it was for them to have this kind of expose
yeah,
of the guru,
yeah,
and then for them to forge a new like financial and career path really after that, even and yet even still striving to find healing in
yeah.
a practice that did really support them and find healing. And that might be like they're tangentially connected to this person, they're not like directly, like
Mm.
that guru never that particular person, right? But he armed the whole practice that he created
Yeah.
for people's benefit. And so it's just and I've seen that cycle actually quite a bit in yoga, and it's just really it's hard, and it's tragic really for anyone.
Yes,
um
I think the teachers in those situations think they're above the rules because there is there's certainly they certainly know what's going on, but there is that sort of sense because it's a spiritual practice that they are above the rules for the mere mortals, which would be like the professional teachers, I guess, right? And what I'm saying is that's not the case. And yeah,
yeah, I think there's a total moral relativism that's at play. That, oh, like, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that we're students or teachers. We're just coming together and
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, consensual, and in some cases inconsensual. It's just it's not right. And I think another point to your article and your blog on this, Bronwen, that I think is really important is creating greater guidelines for Reiki professionals, and that includes like guidelines on what's the trajectory, what's the pathway to become a Reiki teacher in the first place. Because if you just take in Reiki level 1 through 3 with one teacher, or maybe even a few teachers, and then go about professionally teaching, I don't think that you have enough foundation underneath you. And I think that the true, there's a lot lost in the translation of calling yourself a Reiki master. First
Yeah.
of all, there's some stereotypes associated with that. There's kind of racist undertones. There are hierarchical undertones as well when we use the word master, really in relationship to anything. I'm a big proponent of not using that word in relationship to the way I practice and teach Reiki. But we know that the actual language, the Japanese language, speaks that, like, what we call Reiki master was their word for teacher. It's an honorable, venerable word for teacher. And and it just so happens that within the Japanese culture, that whole relationship between student and teacher, in order to become a teacher of oneself, it involves an apprenticeship with that teacher or a specific lineage for a period of time. And I think that's what's really lost in this, and is a missing piece for us in modern day Reiki professionals, is that it would be really helpful to apprentice with a teacher for a period of time until you have the necessary foundations and skills and ethical or oral and
Yeah.
moral guidelines to teach Reiki yourself. And I think that that's really true to the lineage of Reiki from Japan. And where's my kitty?
Hello.
Um, and and then having a greater consensus across lineages of what training is involved and what would it look like. How do you, after taking your Reiki level 1 through 3 courses, like how do
Yeah.
you go about teaching Reiki, um and having some support for that. And I actually have built an apprenticeship program for my students, and it's really gentle. I mean, it's a really simple one. It's like, I encourage you to take Reiki 1 through 3 the first time for your own benefit, and don't even think about teaching it to others. Don't even think about becoming a Reiki teacher. Just take in this knowledge and just use it for yourself. And if you feel that inspiration to continue on to be a Reiki teacher, then what I encourage you to do is take the trainings again, and take them Reiki 1 through 3, and take it with your feet in both worlds. One foot in this role of teacher and one foot back in this role of student, really receiving and absorbing this information, thinking about how you could teach it, but also continuing to embody it for yourself. And then from there, I offer some more support for people, like as they're going into teaching their first training, like they can have an hour Q&A session with me, and some other aspects, so just that they have that sea legs underneath them. Then you feel like, hey, I feel supported to step into this role as Reiki teacher. And I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see some sort of modeling done that can spread across different lineages. And it's also just a great way, I think, to keep that sense of professionalism within our craft. And yeah, anyways, you probably have something to say about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, for example, I always encourage students to also do things like basic counseling skills, because in that, this is included, right? We learn about ethics, we learn about how to be with someone and to listen to someone and not to take advantage of someone. Yeah. I have a question though. What to do if you're a student who has been in a relationship with a teacher, or you're in a relationship with a teacher, and maybe you're listening to this and you think, oh, yeah, this isn't really in my best interests. What do I do? Of course, you can break up with someone for sure. But I mean, is there any recourse for students in that situation? We have
Yeah.
associations. I'm just thinking, what support is there for people who may have gone through this or are going through this? We don't really have, do we?
I think, any healthy relationship, if you want to continue, first of all, you could break up, and then if you want to continue the relationship, there needs to be a separation piece of and following, whatever course of action that might be there for you, like, or, in psychology, or if there is another course of action, like if you want that relationship, that there needs to be some sort of disconnection from how a relationship started. So, but as a recourse for students who engaged in a relationship with a teacher or Reiki teacher, I mean, I don't know, other than karma, I'm not sure.
I know it's just
Other
interesting
than
because in this world, as I said, I think that it's been quite accepted, that it's been normalized because it's a spiritual practice. It's almost saying that the system of Reiki isn't a professional industry, whatever. Where I do see it that it is. And if it has been considered as like this spiritual sort of thing where there's no definitive lines, then where do people go? Who is there to support these people? It's pretty tough, actually. And of course, you can go to therapy yourself and sort yourself out, and be a good suggestion there.
right.
But within the system, we don't have anything. If we're going to continue as this practice, which people all over the world, we hope will practice, and it's so beneficial, then we need to find ways of supporting people and helping people who may be having difficulties, and especially something like this, I think. But I'm not sure how. That's why I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a non-judgmental aspect to it, sometimes you get caught up in an unhealed dynamic, and it points us kind of in the direction of our healing for sure. And it's important to recognize when we've done something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that was wrong. I mean, maybe we knew that it was wrong, or we did it wrong, and I think there is redemption. I think there is forgiveness that somebody should, but that does involve stopping that behavior, right? Not
Yeah,
continuing it.
that's
So
right.
if this sparks discussion, if this triggers anybody who's listening, I just want you to know that we're a safe place. Like, I would love to connect with you, Bronwen. I'm sure you'd love to connect too, and we'd love to talk with you if that has ever happened to you. um and you just need a safe voice, somebody to talk to about it. Please
Yeah.
feel free to reach out. For anybody who feels a lot of thoughts around this issue, please feel free to share them with us in the comments or send us an email directly. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to talk more and foster more debate within the Reiki community of how we can create codes of conduct and ethical standards for practice, and how we can adhere to them, and the benefit of doing so. So thank you all so much for listening today. And any other thoughts, Bronwyn, before we go?
There was just one thing that I did actually years ago for an association here in Australia. I wrote up the ethical guidelines for the association, and I actually did it using the precepts as the foundation for it. And I think that's a really helpful thing to actually think about ethics in relation to the Reiki precepts, because we are Reiki practitioners, and thinking about how they align together and what that might mean for you. If you're a teacher, have something like that on hand. Teach your students that. This is important. By teaching that as well, I think that brings us into alignment with those ethics. Yeah.
All right, friends. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bronwyn, for sparking this important discussion. And yeah, we hope it serves the larger Reiki community. And we'll see you again soon. Love you so much. Have a great day. Mwah.